You really thought she left you something significant, didn't you? My mother's voice was pleasant the way a paper cut is pleasant. Small, precise, and designed to sting. That's almost sweet. We were sitting in the formal dining room of my parents' house in Scottsdale, the kind of room that exists only to impress people who will never actually eat in it. My grandmother, Eleanor, had died 6 weeks earlier, and tonight was supposed to be a quiet family dinner. Instead, it felt like a sentencing hearing, where I hadn't been told the charges. My uncle, James, my mother's younger brother, had flown in from Portland. My father sat at the head of the table, cutting his steak with the careful focus of a man who had decided not to participate in whatever was about to happen. My brother Colton was on his phone, smiling at something that had nothing to do with the rest of us. And my mother, Diane, was looking at me the way she always looked at me when she wanted me to feel small without being able to prove she was trying. I just want to understand what the estate actually looks like, I said. Grandma told me she had set aside money specifically for me. She told you a lot of things. My mother reached for her wine. Mom was generous with her words. That doesn't mean the accounts reflected it. She had a will. She had several drafts of a will. The last one was handled through the family trust. Your father and I are the trustees. She said it the way someone announces they've already eaten the last piece of cake. Final, done. Everything is being managed responsibly. You'll receive distributions when the time is appropriate. My uncle looked at me from across the table. He didn't say anything. He just held my gaze for a moment too long, the way someone does when they want you to know there's a conversation that needs to happen somewhere else. I didn't push it at dinner. I had learned a long time ago that pushing anything with my mother in a room full of people only ever made me look hysterical and her look reasonable. I smiled, I ate, I helped clear the plates. But I noticed things. I have always noticed things. It is, professionally speaking, what I get paid to do. I am a CPA. Not the kind who does tax returns for small businesses, though I did that for 2 years out of school. I specialize in forensic accounting. I work for a firm in Phoenix that gets called in when companies suspect someone is stealing from them, when divorcing couples hide assets, when estates look smaller on paper than they should. I spend my days finding money that someone has tried to make disappear. I am very good at it. My mother knew my job title. She did not understand what it meant. To her, I was an accountant, which in her mind was a person who sat in a beige office doing math that a computer could do better. She said it at parties the way someone says their child works in customer service. Technically accurate, quietly embarrassing. Colton, my brother, was in commercial real estate. He drove a Porsche Cayenne that my parents had co-signed for because, as my mother explained when I asked, his image mattered to his clients. He was 32 and had closed 4 deals in the last year and a half. I knew this because my mother mentioned it every time she talked about him, which was frequently, and every time she talked to me, which was less so. James found me in the kitchen after dinner while I was rinsing glasses. My mother had gone upstairs to take a call. My father had retreated to his office, and Colton was somewhere in the backyard on his phone. The trust is worth about $340,000, James said, without preamble, keeping his voice low. Eleanor told me last year, before she got sick, she was very specific about it. She wanted you to have $280,000 of it. She said it by name, Claire. She said your name. I turned the water off. Did she put it in the will? She put it in the trust documents. Your parents are the trustees. They control the distributions and the accounting. Have you seen the statements? He shook his head. They won't show them to me. I asked twice, and your mother said the trust attorney handles all communications and that I should go through proper channels if I had questions. He paused. The trust attorney is a guy your father plays golf with. I stood there for a moment, drying my hands on a dish towel, working through the architecture of what he was telling me. It wasn't complicated. It was actually the oldest structure in the book. You put money somewhere that requires a trusted person to manage it, and then you become that trusted person, and then you simply stop being trustworthy. The money doesn't vanish. It migrates. It becomes a Range Rover, or a vacation house, or a series of loans to a son who never pays them back. How long has the trust been active? I asked. 6 years. Eleanor set it up when she was first diagnosed. 6 years of statements. 6 years of distributions, investments, fees, and withdrawals. 6 years of a paper trail that someone had presumably been very careful to manage. Tell me one more thing, I said. Does my mother know that you know the number? James looked at the doorway. No. I nodded. Good. Don't tell her. And don't ask for anything else. I need them comfortable. He studied me for a moment. You've done this before. Every week, I said. I drove back to my apartment and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of coffee that went cold before I touched it. I wrote down everything I knew. the trust value, the intended distribution, the trustees, the timeline, the golf buddy attorney. The problem with investigating your own family is that it is both easier and harder than investigating strangers. Easier, because I knew their patterns, their blind spots, the specific shape of their arrogance. My mother believed, fundamentally and without question, that she was the smartest person in any room she entered. My father believed whatever my mother told him to believe. Colton believed that money was a natural resource that flowed toward deserving people, and that he was, by definition, deserving. Harder, because I was not supposed to know. The moment I asked for documents directly, they would close ranks. My mother would call her golf buddy attorney, use words like hostile and family conflict, and I would spend 3 years in probate court watching $100,000 get eaten by legal fees. What I needed was to let them show me. I called James the next morning. I had a plan, and it required him to do one thing. I need you to tell my mother that you've been approached by an estate litigation attorney, I said. Don't say I told you to do this. Just say that a friend referred you, someone who handles contested trusts, and that you've had a preliminary conversation. And what does that accomplish? It tells her the clock is ticking. People who are hiding something don't behave the same when they think someone is looking as when they think no one is. When she feels pressure from outside, she'll move to consolidate. She'll want documentation ready. She'll want the numbers to look clean. There was a quiet pause. You want them to create the evidence. I want them to manufacture something I can dismantle. James made the call on a Tuesday. By Wednesday evening, my mother had texted me, unprompted, cheerful, asking if I wanted to come for brunch on Saturday. She was making frittata. My mother does not make frittata. She does not cook. She has a housekeeper named Rosa who cooks. The frittata was not about food. I said yes. When I arrived Saturday, Colton was already there, which was unusual for 11 inches the morning on a weekend. He was wearing the particular expression he wore when he had been briefed on something and was trying to act like he hadn't been. My father was reading the newspaper with the focused attention of a man who had been told to stay out of it. My mother sat across from me with her coffee and smiled. I spoke to the trust attorney this week, she said, in the tone of someone delivering reassuring news. I wanted to have everything organized, given James's little concerns. You know how he gets. He was always the anxious one. She slid a folder across the table. These are the current statements. I want you to feel confident that everything has been handled with complete care. I looked at the folder. I didn't open it yet. Thank you, I said. I really appreciate the transparency. She visibly relaxed, just slightly, at the word transparency. People always relax at that word. It signals that you believe they are being honest. I have used it in depositions. I took the folder home. I opened it at my kitchen table with the reading glasses I wear when I am working and a second cup of coffee and the very particular feeling I get when I am about to find something. The documents were 32 pages. Trust statements covering the last 3 years. A summary of distributions, a letter from the attorney on letterhead, and a current balance summary showing $94,000 remaining in the trust, with a note that the original corpus had been reduced through documented administrative costs, qualified investment losses, and trustee compensation per the trust instrument. I read that phrase 3 times. Trustee compensation per the trust instrument. My mother had paid herself to manage her own mother's money. That was legal, technically. It depended entirely on what the trust instrument actually said and how much compensation it authorized. It was also, in my experience, one of the most reliable indicators that something else was wrong. People who steal money tend to make sure they have at least one fully legitimate mechanism so they can point to it and say, see, it is all above board. I started with the investment account. The statements showed a portfolio managed by an advisory firm I hadn't heard of. The returns were listed for 3 years, modestly positive in year 1, flat in year 2, a 14% loss in year 3, attributed to market conditions and strategic reallocation. The current value of the investment portion was listed at $41,000, down from an original transfer of $180,000. I pulled up FINRA BrokerCheck, the public database where registered investment advisors are required to file their information. The advisory firm was registered. The advisor of record had 2 prior regulatory actions, both related to unsuitable investment recommendations for elderly clients. Neither had resulted in a license revocation. Both had resulted in settlements. I noted that. Then I looked at the fee structure. The statements showed a 1% annual management fee, which was standard. They also showed something called a strategic consultation fee charged quarterly, $3,800 per quarter, $15,200 per year for 3 years. That was $45,600 in consultation fees on top of the management fee, for an account that had lost 60% of its value. I pulled up the original trust document. James had a copy that Eleanor had given him years earlier. He emailed it to me that night. I read Section 7, the section governing trustee compensation and authorized expenditures, twice. It authorized a standard trustee fee not to exceed 1% of the trust corpus per year. It said nothing about strategic consultation fees. It did not authorize them. They were not permitted by the document. That was $45,600 that had been taken from the trust without legal authority. I kept going. The distributions column showed one payment to me over 3 years, $4,000, noted as a qualified distribution for educational or professional development purposes, dated 14 months ago. I had no memory of receiving $4,000 from the trust. I pulled up my bank records from that period. Nothing. I searched every account I had. No deposit of $4,000 from any trust account, any law firm, any advisory account, or any entity connected to my family. They had recorded a distribution to me that they had never made, which meant they had taken $4,000 and documented it as going to me, creating a paper record that would make it look like I had already begun receiving my inheritance. There was a specific term for that. It was not a nice term. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Here is what I had so far. Unauthorized fees totaling $45,600, a phantom distribution of $4,000 entered in my name, an investment account that had lost 78% of its value, managed by an advisor with a regulatory history, and a current balance of $94,000 in a trust that should have held $280,000 intended for me. The gap was $186,000. That was where I needed to look next. I went back to the investment statements and ran the numbers myself. Not the summary numbers, the actual trade confirmations and transaction records that were attached in the back of the portfolio pages. This part took 3 hours. I made a spreadsheet. I tracked every buy, every sell, every transfer, every fee. The math did not reconcile. The stated opening balance and the stated closing balance, when you followed the actual transactions, did not produce the result shown. There was a discrepancy of $67,000 between what the transaction history supported and what the summary page claimed as the current value. Someone had changed the summary page. The transactions were real. They reflected an actual account. The ending balance had been adjusted upward by $67,000. Presumably so, the statements would look more reasonable when presented to someone who just read the summary and didn't run the underlying figures. I thought about who had prepared these documents. Not the advisory firm, they wouldn't falsify their own statements. The liability was too catastrophic. These documents had been given to the advisory firm's real statements and then edited. The letterhead was real. The transaction pages were real. The summary page and the balance page had been altered. I opened the PDF in the software I use for document examination. I looked at the metadata. The original file had been created by the advisory firm's document management system 14 days ago. But the file had been modified. The modification timestamp was 6 days ago, at 11:47 p.m. The modifying application was Microsoft Word, not a PDF editor, which meant someone had converted the PDF to Word, changed the numbers, and converted it back. The conversion process had left artifacts microscopically inconsistent font rendering on the pages that had been altered versus the pages that hadn't, a barely perceptible difference in the grid alignment of the table on the balance summary page. The modification timestamp and the application matched a device name embedded in the file properties. It was a Windows machine. The device name was Colton Surface. I sat with that for a long time. I want to tell you that I felt something dramatic in that moment. Shock, betrayal, grief. But I have sat across from enough tables where someone explained to me how they had been robbed by people they trusted to know that the feeling is not dramatic, it is quiet. It is the specific silence of something that you suspected becoming something that you know. It doesn't feel like a door slamming. It feels like a door you thought might be locked, turning out to have been open the entire time. I called James. "I need 2 weeks," I said, "and I need you to do one more thing for me." He listened. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You're sure?" he said. "The device name is in the file." Another pause. "Your mother is going to say you fabricated it." "Yes," I said. "That's why we're not using my findings alone. Here is how the trap worked. James called my mother and told her he was willing to drop his concerns about the estate, but that as a condition of doing so, he needed to attend one formal meeting with the trust attorney present, where the full trust accounting would be reviewed by a neutral third party. He said it was just for his own peace of mind. He said he would pay for the third party himself. He proposed a specific name, a forensic accounting firm in Phoenix that I did not work for, but whose senior partner I had trained under 12 years ago and trusted completely. My mother agreed immediately. Of course she did. She had already prepared the documents. She believed the numbers looked right. She believed no one in the room would know how to look at a PDF the way I looked at a PDF. She did not know I would be there. James had not mentioned me. The meeting was at the trust attorney's office, a suite on the 14th floor of an office building downtown, with views of Camelback Mountain and furniture that was aggressively tasteful. The attorney, a tall man named Barrett, who had the handshake of someone who had been practicing his handshake, seemed mildly surprised when I walked in behind James. My mother's expression moved through several things before settling on something carefully neutral. "Claire," she said, "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us." "James invited me," I said. "I hope that's all right." She looked at Barrett. He shrugged. It wasn't his place to exclude a trust beneficiary from a review meeting. Colton was sitting in the corner chair and he was looking at his phone, which was his tell. Colton always retreated to his phone when he was nervous. The senior partner from the accounting firm, a woman named Dr. Patricia Osei, sat at the side of the table with a printed copy of the trust documents and the statements my mother had provided. She had reviewed them in advance. She was here to ask questions and provide an independent assessment. My mother presented first. She was very good at it. She had done this before, not this specifically, but the performance of confident authority in a room full of people who are supposed to defer to her. She spoke about Eleanor's wishes, about the complexity of managing a trust during a period of market volatility, about her dedication to stewarding the family's legacy responsibly. She used the word stewardship twice. She gestured to the documents with the ease of someone who has nothing to hide. Dr. Osei asked her first question. "Can you walk me through the basis for the strategic consultation fees? I see them listed as quarterly charges, totaling just over $45,000 over 3 years. What trust provision authorized those?" My mother looked at Barrett. Barrett looked at the trust document. "That would fall under the general administrative expense provision," Barrett said. "Section 7, I said. "It authorizes trustee compensation not to exceed 1% of corpus per year, and it defines authorized expenditures as legal fees, filing fees, and standard advisory fees. It does not include a separate consulting fee category." Barrett was quiet. He looked at the document again. He was the trust attorney. He had presumably drafted it, or reviewed it, or at minimum been paid to know what was in it. He had a very particular expression now, the expression of a man recalculating several things simultaneously. "The language is open to interpretation," my mother said smoothly. "The language is specific," I said. "I did not say it with heat. I said it the way I say it when I'm testifying. Flat, clean, factual." Dr. Osei moved to the investment statements. She asked about the transaction reconciliation. She asked my mother to explain the difference between the transaction history total and the summary balance. My mother said she would need to refer that to the investment advisor. Dr. Osei said she had already contacted the investment advisor's compliance department before the meeting, and they had confirmed the actual current balance of the account, as of that morning, was $41,000, consistent with the transaction history and inconsistent with the summary page, which showed $108,000. My mother looked at Colton. Colton had put his phone face down on the arm of his chair. "There may have been an error in the document preparation," my mother said. "There was a modification," I said. I opened my laptop. The PDF metadata shows the file was modified 6 days ago at 11:47 p.m. The modifying device is listed as Colton Surface. The pages that were altered show font rendering artifacts consistent with a Word-to-PDF conversion, which is different from the rendering on the unaltered pages, which were produced natively by the advisory firm's system. I turned my screen toward the room. Colton stood up. "That is not. I was just reformatting the document for printing. The original was formatted wrong." "You changed the balance figure," I said. "Still flat. The transaction history supports $41,000. The summary you submitted today shows $108,000. That's a $67,000 discrepancy. Would you like to explain the reformatting that produced a number that's $67,000 higher than the underlying transactions support?" The room was very quiet. My mother turned to Barrett. Her voice had shifted register, the pleasant social tone completely gone, replaced with something tighter. "We need to stop this meeting. This is clearly a coordinated ambush, and There is also a distribution listed in my name," I said. $4,000, 14 months ago, listed as a qualified distribution to me. I have reviewed every bank account and financial account I hold. I did not receive that distribution. The $4,000 was recorded as going to me and went somewhere else. Barrett closed his folder. He was not looking at my mother anymore. He was looking at his own hands on the table with the focused attention of a man doing rapid legal math in his head. Being a trustee's attorney was one thing. Being present while a trustee committed fraud in your office was a very different category of problem, and I could see exactly the moment he understood the distinction. I think, Dr. Osei said, in the measured tone of someone who does this professionally, that we should pause and allow all parties to consult separately with counsel before proceeding. My mother stood. She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her before. Not anger, I had seen her angry many times. This was something more elemental. It was the look of a person who has been certain for a very long time that they were the only one in the room paying attention, discovering that they were wrong. We did this for you, she said. All of it. The investments, the management, the structure. We were protecting the money from you. You were protecting the money from me, I said. That's accurate. You have no idea how to manage wealth. You would have spent it on your apartment and your car, and you'd have nothing left. My grandmother left it to me specifically, I said. She knew me. She knew what I did for work. She trusted my judgment. You decided her judgment was wrong. I paused. What you're describing isn't protection. It's just taking. She started to say something else, and I looked away from her, toward James, who was sitting very still with his hands folded on the table in front of him, and I could see he was trying not to let his face do anything complicated, and not entirely succeeding. My mother and Colton left together. Barrett stayed and had a quiet, brief, and visibly uncomfortable conversation with Dr. Osei. I sat in the chair and looked at Camelback Mountain out the window and thought about Eleanor, her kitchen that always smelled like coffee and wool, the way she had pressed my hand the last time I visited her in the hospital and said, I put it in writing, sweetheart. I made sure of it. She had made sure of it. It had just taken a little longer than she anticipated. The legal process was not fast and it was not pleasant, and I am not going to pretend it was the satisfying, clean arc that it looks like in retrospect. There were 6 weeks of attorneys and correspondence and one very tense mediation session where my mother arrived with a different lawyer who used the phrase good faith mismanagement 4 times in 2 hours. There was a period where my father called me twice a week, not yelling, just tired, asking if we could find a way to keep things private, asking if I understood what this was doing to the family. I understood what it was doing to the family. I also understood what had been done to me for 6 years. While I filed quarterly estimated taxes and turned down vacations and told myself I was building something, not knowing that $280,000 of my grandmother's love and intention was being slowly converted into my brother's lifestyle and my parents' comfort. In the end, there was a settlement. The trust was restructured under an independent trustee, a professional fiduciary, with no connection to my family. The $280,000, plus interest calculated from the original trust establishment date, was transferred to me in full. The unauthorized fees were repaid. The phantom distribution was corrected. The investment advisor's firm was reported to FINRA for the unsuitable investment history, separately from the trust issues, because that was a matter of public interest and not just mine. My mother's attorney tried, in the final hour of the final mediation session, to insert a non-disclosure clause into the settlement. I declined. I did not say it with satisfaction or with anger. I just said no and explained that I would not sign a document restricting my ability to discuss my own inheritance, and the clause was removed. My brother called me once after it was over. He was not apologetic exactly. He was something more like confused. The way people are when a system they assumed was just the natural order of things turns out to have been an injustice the whole time. He said, I didn't think it was actually yours. I said, I know. That was the problem. He didn't say anything after that, and neither did I, and eventually the call ended. I am writing this from the home office of the small practice I opened 8 months ago. It is not large. It is mine. The $280,000 is not all here. Some of it is in index funds. Some of it is in a 6-month emergency reserve. Some of it went toward the deposit on this office space. Eleanor believed in having something solid beneath you before you build. She told me that once, years ago, over coffee in that kitchen that smelled like wool. The week I opened the practice, I had a photo of her framed and put it on the bookshelf behind my desk, where clients can see it and where I can see it when I'm on calls. She is smiling in it, slightly out of focus, her hands wrapped around a mug, looking at something outside the frame. She looks entirely like herself. My mother texted me last month, on my birthday. Happy birthday, Claire. I hope you're doing well. I read it and set my phone down and went back to the deposition transcript I was working through, a case involving a small business owner whose partner had been siphoning cash through a vendor account for 3 years. There is a specific patience required for this work. You have to be willing to sit with the numbers for a very long time, to follow them past the point where most people get bored or frustrated or willing to believe what they are told. You have to be willing to keep looking, even when the picture is starting to become something you don't want it to be. My grandmother knew what she was doing when she put my name in that document. She knew what I did. She knew how I saw things. She was not protecting me from money. She was giving me a resource and trusting me to know what to do with it. She was right. I did.